Welcome to Writer's Life, an ongoing conversation with writers, authors, and folks in the publishing industry. I'm your host, Marvel Harrison, Publishing Director, Mimbres Press of Western New Mexico University. It is with great pleasure today I share a conversation with Stella Pope Duarte, an accomplished writer who has won honors and awards nationwide, including an American Book Award, a Pulitzer Prize nomination, the Southwest Book of the Year Award, and a Book Sense 76 selection. Welcome to Writer's Life, Stella.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
You know, you've had such an extensive writing career. I'm very interested in learning how and when you became a writer.
And I want to start in this magical journey that I've been on in 1995. That was a crucial year for me as far as being a writer. And that was the year that I had a dream of my father. And I've kept memoirs, over the years, as most writers often do. And sometimes I would write my dreams, which are metaphorical and so forth. But in this case, this dream was more like a vision. So I had 3 jobs, I had 4 kids. And at the time, all my children were with me. I've been a single parent, for many number of years. Now, of course, they're grown and I have grandchildren and so forth. But at the time, they were with me. So I had all these jobs in university and at the districts and you name it, I was doing it. And I was also a therapist. I have a master's in counseling at clinics and so forth. So here comes the dream. And in the dream, I was lost in this big building. And it was so clear in the building that I could even hear the water in the pipes. And I wanted out of that building. I was supposed to present and I was looking for the right room and I couldn't find it. So I don't like elevators, even in my dreams, I don't like anything that confines. So I was looking, where am I going to get out of here? Where am I going to get out of here? And then I saw a staircase leading downwards. So I said, that's it. So I went down the stairs and at the bottom of the staircase was my father. And he had passed away 10 years prior to the dream. And he was waiting for me. He was dressed in his work clothes because my father was a carpenter. He's a very hardworking man. He had on his hat. He had on his boots. He had on his khaki, pants and shirt, ready for work. And as I reached the bottom, my father took my hand. And that became very significant to me later because that's how lost I was. Sometimes we lose our way. We lose who we are in the process of doing so many things, which is what had happened. So he takes my hand like a baby. And he leads me to a spiral staircase that climbed high into the heavens. And it was this magnificent, you see it on every page of my website, has some kind of spiral staircase. And it climbed, it was salmon colored, and it climbed into the heavens, into a blue sky such as I had never seen before. And it disappeared in white clouds. And so my father and I were looking at this magnificent, spiral staircase. And my father kept telling me, but not with his voice, with thought. He kept telling me, it's right there, mija, which means, my daughter. It's right there, mija. What you have to do next, it's right in front of you. And he kept telling me, it's right there. It's right there. What you have to do next. So I woke up at that point with that vision of that magnificent spiral staircase. Of course, I had absolutely no idea what it meant. As a matter of fact, for 2 weeks, I even argued with my dad. You're insane. You never take it literally. I started saying, Dad, I don't understand what you want me to know about this. What is it that I need to do? What is it that you're trying to tell me? I don't get it. So I was desperate to understand the significance. So I went to a bookstore. In those days, there were lots of bookstores. And this one was open till almost midnight. So I remember just putting my hand over the shelves, and then into my hand dropped a book. And it was a book by Bessie Head, South African writer, who suffered great discrimination and terrible during the apartheid years in South Africa. And she had written a book called Tales of Tenderness and Power. So I love reading. I love everything multicultural. So I brought it home. With me. And then as I looked through her book, I saw that she was writing about her village, about the 2 young lovers who ran away, about the 2 boys who had fought over the land and so forth.
So
And I
these
thought,
were real stories that were emerging that she was sharing.
absolutely. And I thought, wait a minute, I have a village too. My little barrio, barrio is an Aztec word, it's not even a Spanish word. A little barrio, a little humble place in South Phoenix where mainstream America said, oh my God, this is terrible that they still live like that. I was born and raised there with all the love and beauty of the people who live there. And I thought, oh my God. And that's when I started all my brainstorming on every image I could remember from my childhood and from my own village, because we all have a village, all of us. I don't care where you are, where you're from, you have a place. And that's what started my work with Fragile Night, my first short story collection, Fragile Night.
Well, what a beautiful start. And, you were well into your life at that point. It wasn't like you started out as a really young person rolling with that, but your history certainly impacted, your writing. I'm thinking about that you're a descendant of Irish and Mexican American parents, and you were raised in that small barrio in South Phoenix. And, how has your cultural heritage impacted your writing?
Big time. Big time, because who you are will show up in your work. I tell my students, I work with students across this nation and at ASU and so forth, but it was always with education and counseling, because that was where I come from. And then later, as I understood the dream, I had to go to ASU for a year to take writing classes, because I wanted to understand how to do this. I had published a little poem here, a little story there in college or high school, where. But boy, I tell you, once I understood Bessie Head and her message of not leaving behind who you are, I began to understand that my heart, my treasure, was where I had come from. Because I was wondering, Dad, what should I write about? What should I write about? And then Bessie Head came with her wonderful stories to tell me that. So the culture, the ethnicity, and people will say, well, still, I don't want to really write about my family. I don't blame them, because I've written a memoir, but it's all about how I do my writing process, writing through revelations, visions, and dreams. It's a memoir, but it's not about my family. I don't have the guts to write about my family yet. But
I have a friend who has done a lot of writing, and she says, well, I've written this wonderful book, but I can't publish it until everybody dies.
Everybody's gone. I understand. And so, but the ethnicity will come through. Like if I'm grappling with patience, one of my characters will be doing the same. And I'm not saying the character is me. I'm not saying that at all, because creative writing is so powerful. Once you start with that energy of creation, it will take you to places you never dreamed possible. And those characters may have some of the longings you had, may be from the same culture, may be from the same faith or whatever you're dealing with, but they are their own person. That's how powerful writing is. But you will show up in your work.
So you're describing being the vessel for stories and really pouring out and through you, which of course impacts who you are, but your history impacts the story, but you're not a main character in it.
Exactly. Except in my memoir. I am, but only in the process of writing. I'm not otherwise, no.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's really wonderful. So are you still base in the barrio, or where do you live now?
I live actually off of 7th Avenue, because the body where I lived was off of 7th Avenue, but it was in South Phoenix, and now I live in the northern part of Phoenix, but still off of 7th Avenue. Mm-hmm. Not far from where my childhood home is. Of course, it's been sold, and so forth. And sometimes people will pass by and take a picture because they're doing a report about my work or what have you. And they'll take a picture of my family home. But I tell them that's not really the way it looked. It's a little bit the way it looked, but not exactly. So it's still there, and the memories are still there. And I continue to utilize whatever faith-based, because my faith is very important to me, and it was important to my family as well. So I continue to use those elements in writing and just shuffle them around and let my characters and the story create more powerful connections than I could have ever imagined.
Well, how do you, you have a very busy life. How do you really manage your writing within the hecticness of everyday? I think you referred to it to me as the grind of everyday life.
Oh, yes, it is the grind of everyday life. And I tell you, sometimes I tell people I'm just like a sitting duck, I'm just like a sitting duck because when we were under isolation because of COVID and so forth, I had been traveling a lot. And then once that hit, there's no way, everything ended and things began to shuffle around. So I began to do Zoom and so forth. So this daily grind is upon us always as writers. And I have a family, I have my 4 kids, I have grandchildren. Every celebration that we have ever had in relationship to my children or grandchildren has been celebrated in my home because I'm very family oriented. I absolutely love to see my family just enjoying and loving one another. But there is a grind to everything and you cannot live without it. So it is up to us, and this is what I can offer, awareness of how that grind is working inside of you. Because when I feel myself getting on, like a loss of equilibrium, a loss of my thoughts becoming, I become like concerned about too many things and afflicted by too many things, is when I began to say, okay, what's going on inside of me? And once you start asking those questions, wait a minute, what's going on inside of me? Am I too caught up in the politics? Am I too caught up in the daily news? Do I have to step back? And this is when I take the volition to center myself and say, no, I'm not going down that path. I'm going to go back to the center.
So what do you use to center yourself? What's in your tool chest?
Well, the first thing I have to do is be aware. Be aware of what it is I'm contending with. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's something from the past that's suddenly afflicting me. Maybe I'm just bugged at somebody that I thought was going to be there. You know how it is in this world. This world is cutthroat. Publishing, I as you well know, publishing is cutthroat, and it's either or. Somebody's going to stand by your side or they're not. Somebody's going to be there or they're not, or that kind of thing. So when I identify what it is that's causing me to become scrambled inside and to move away from the relationship with I told many of my students, is a relationship, one of the most powerful relationships that anyone will ever have on this earth is with their creative energy. So once I center in on that little affliction, I think, I know, I'm just thinking about my ex-husband and all the stuff that he did and all the past memories. And I said, okay, how long do I want to keep thinking about it? This is questions I'm asking myself. Do I want to keep thinking it for 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes? I'm telling you, Marla, I have even timed myself and said, okay, I thought about this for the last 15 minutes or so. Am I ready to give it up? I'm challenging myself. Mm-hmm. Am I ready to give it up? And I said, yes, because it's not doing me a darn bit of good. Okay. And then I began that's how I deal with myself internally. And unless we learn how to deal with ourselves internally, we will always be in chaos in one way or another. Mm-hmm. Does it make sense to you? Or?
It certainly makes sense. I mean, I think the ability to let go and understand that letting go isn't giving up.
Yeah,
is a really important process for each one of us. Mm-hmm. To be able to manage our lives and to know who we are. And I think that little trick you use about, okay, I'm going to just go ahead and obsess.
Yes.
Over what you mentioned, your husband. It's and I have this many, and I'm going to obsess. I'm going to go for it. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how that can just pull the plug out of the energy behind that, because you're not in that internal process.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that you brought up that part about, that you use the term, the cutthroat part of publishing. And, one of the things we're really committed to at Mimbres is to be author friendly and author supportive, mm-hmm. Because Anybody who writes something can get it now printed, can get it published.
Yes.
It's there. But to actually do it as a team and in a way that supports the writer into becoming an author, I
Yes.
think is the gift that we might be able to have. So I appreciate your support for what we have, and I'm so happy you're a part of our team.
I totally agree with you. And one of the pleasures has been mentoring my some of my writing students over the years. People have stayed in touch with me from conferences and so forth. And it means a lot to them when I actually call, they can call me. I can whatever, they can call me. And we'll talk about it, or we'll email one another, or we'll text one another. And it is my joy to bring some sense into their lives about what it is they're doing. And I tell them, you can take my, what I'm saying or not. It's your work. Do with it as you wish. And they feel a freedom. They said, Stella, you just gave me this freedom to be who I am. What was I doing? And one man told me, he's a businessman. And he started, in the writing world. He said, Stella, can I talk to you? I said, sure. He said, you know what? I hate to say this, but I just want to write a kid's book. Here's this 40-year-old businessman. And I just wrote my first child's book, Bonko, the Little Donkey That Saved Christmas, in both languages. It's just been published, just barely yet. And so he says, is that okay? And I said, yeah, yes. And he's written some wonderful children's books and had a lot of success with it, this businessman.
I think that those of those folks that have been able to be grounded in life, it's like you grow up, and growing up is not losing childhood, it's really gaining adulthood while integrating and maintaining that sense of childness wonder. And good for him, and good for you supporting him in that beautiful process. What surprises have come your way in your writing?
Wow. The surprises are hundreds.
Okay.
Maybe close to 1,000 since I started publishing in 1997. The Dream of My Dad, 95. By 97, I was published. By 96, after The Dream of My Dad, 95, 96, I had my first book contract. Just like that. It happened that quickly. And I had been writing and so forth. But I'm just going to say 3 surprises because there's so many of them. I decided to dwindle it to 3 surprises, okay? And they all relate to Let Their Spirits Dance, which I wrote the screenplay, and it's in the hands of a producer now. And hopefully it'll go onto the big screen. I'm not sure. But anyway, when I was writing Let Their Spirits Dance, it's about a young man from Phoenix who is killed during the Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And in order to do that, I went into Vietnam with my 12-year-old son at the time, 1999, he was 12 years old. And we went there. I went to the Vietnam Memorial Wall 6 times. I went across the country twice. I do not leave a stone unturned when I am doing research. And I need to get the grasp of where these veterans were, what was going on. So I was at a school as a counselor. I wasn't head of counseling yet. I was one of the counselors. And I put out the word that I was looking for anyone who had served in Vietnam, from Phoenix, or a family who had lost their son in Vietnam. In those days, there were not women in combat yet. So here comes a call to me. And it was a woman named Gracie that I knew in high school. She wasn't a close friend, but I knew her. And I did not know her brother, Tony Cruz, Sergeant Tony Cruz. So she said, my brother died in Vietnam. Stella, I'm willing to give you an interview. So I went to her, her home, and we're sitting there in the kitchen. Okay, watch what happens. Watch this surprise. And for every work I do, I make a vow. And I thought to myself, I'm going to dedicate this book to the first soldier whose family I interviewed who died in Vietnam. And it was Tony Cruz, not knowing what was going to happen. So my dedication was to the memory of Sergeant Tony Cruz and all La Raza, means, the Latinos, all La Raza who died in Vietnam, we hear you. And that was my dedication. So here I'm talking to his sister. And she said, you know what, Stella, Tony told us when he left for Vietnam from Sky Harbor, that someday he was going to be famous, that we were going to read about him in a book, that he was going to make history. And I said, what what are you telling me? And so I read the dedication to her, and chills went through both of our arms. And later I talked to his mother, his sister, his brother. They said, yes, he told us someday I'm going to be famous. You're going to read about me in a book. And the mother, no say, I don't know what my son meant, but now I know, because they were there with me at the launching of the book with over 400 people launching Let Their Spirits Dance. And I introduced him because he was my guide. It wasn't about Tony. You know, my character is Jesse, you know, but Tony became my spiritual guide. Now, the statistics for finding the family whose son had served and died, and being my first interview, remember I promised I would do it dedicated to the first soldier. It's insanity to put statistics. How could I find a needle in a haystack? You know what I'm saying? But that's exactly what happened. So after all my research, here's the other surprise number 2. After all my research in Vietnam and in across the country and everywhere, I had written a full draft of a novel. But I wanted something very dynamic to open up that novel, because how you start a novel is crucial to that novel. And I couldn't think. So one day, my kids already knew. They said, when they saw me like this, they would say, Mom's zoning out. She's over there talking to, we don't know who she's talking to now. So I felt like doing something with my hands. And I'm not a physical, you know, an artist that paints or does any of that. I was desperate. So I got a piece of paper, I, you know, crunched it up and threw it on my desk at home. Of course, I was head of counseling by then. There's no way I would do these fanatical things at school. So I looked at it and I thought, well, what is it? And all of a sudden, in my mind came these words. It's the passion flower your mom had when you were a kid. The passion flower. So I sought my sister, who's passed away. One of my greatest mentors was my sister, who passed away. You know, when the book came out, she said, I'm going to stay with you. She was very, very ill, but she stayed with me throughout the entire book. And she had a book about, you know, flowers. And on the back was a huge picture of the passion flower my mom had when I was a kid. My mom was a passionate flower and plant person. So when I understood that, I went home that night after securing the book from my sister about 10 o'clock at night. Because when you're like this, you don't care what time it is. You are on a mission to get that book or whatever. So I come home and I wrote the words, the passion vine bloomed until late November, the year Jesse died. Amazing. And as soon as I wrote that sentence, the whole novel just put itself in front of me like a gift. You did what we wanted you to do. That's how powerful the work is. And every step of the way in doing this, I've had so many other encounters with surprises over the years. When I went to the Vietnam Memorial Wall, another huge surprise. The first time I had been to the wall, but hadn't really, you know, noticed it. But now I had a cameraman with me, and he was documenting me. And as I went through the wall, I saw that almost every fourth, and I want to even get tears in my eyes right now, every fourth or fifth name on the Vietnam Memorial Wall is a Spanish surname. Yes. From Latinos all over the world who served our country in that war. I couldn't believe it. And I just started crying all over that wall. And I finally told the cameraman, just cut it, cut the camera. And I knelt down at that wall and I promised those men that I would tell their story to the world. And that's exactly what happened. I have told their story to the world.
Yes, you have. And what a gift you have in that and in so many other parts of your writing. You know, we need to wind down here, but what would be a tip or two that you might leave for, you know, new writers, young or old?
Very simple. And it's this: trust yourself. Don't listen. As you're writing, as you are starting to birth a work, let it happen. Don't censor yourself. Don't start correcting every other sentence. Let it be born. You can go back and correct. You can go back and edit. Don't listen. Be careful who you show your work to, because you could show it to somebody who said, oh no, if I were you, they don't even know anything about writing. And they're, you know, and maybe they're good people. I'm not saying they're bad. And they'll give you bad advice. Or they'll say, oh no, if I were you, I wouldn't do that. I'd go this way. Be careful who you show your work to. Trust the work. Trust your work, your relationship. Ask the work. Am I going in the right direction? Is this what I should be doing? And then just let the work talk to you. Sometimes I even put my hand, you know, when I'm sleeping on my manuscript that I'm actively working on. Maybe in my dreams, it'll show me something, which it has many, many times. And sometimes the dreams that I'm dreaming during a novel or whatever, they're in the book because they were meant for the book. That's how powerful it is. I'm begging these. I am telling anyone who's listening, who's a writer, trust yourself first and be careful who and where you show your writing. Careful at the beginning.
Very, very sage advice. Thank you, Stella, for your time. It has been an inspiration to speak with you today. And thanks too to everyone who has joined us.
Thank you so much.
Marvel Harrison.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure for me.
I'm Marvel Harrison, and from all of us at Mimbres Press, may your day be sparked with curiosity and wonder. See you again on the next Writer's Life.